I get way too much credit for our success. That was from Todd Monken today at his introductory press conference in Baltimore. Obviously, the former Georgia offensive coordinator has taken over the same job for the Baltimore Ravens, and he had a lot to say today that was very important. Part of that was he says. He says, it doesn't mean I'm not grateful for Kirby Smart and the coaches I worked with. I get way too much credit for our success. He goes on to say, this is actually very, very important. He said, I came in and the culture was already set. The players were already recruited. The staff we put together was tremendous in terms of our success. And then he said, but this is what's next. So he goes on to say, if I was going to do it, talking about moving on to the NFL, it was going to be somewhere that was parallel to Georgia. And when you think about the Ravens, they have had a lot of success over time. And not just the sort of Trent Dilfer whack job Super Bowl. They have been a really, really good franchise for an extended period of time. And they have won at a really high level. I do not know what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson. Someone a lot more tied in can talk to you about that. But I think there's a couple of things I want to touch on here that are correct from what Todd Monken had to say. He said, "I get way too much credit for our success." Well, that's totally, that's up to the eye of the beholder. And Todd Monken should get a fair amount of success credit for the success at Georgia. To be frank, I mean, uh, his offenses performed when they needed to in 21 and 22, and as great as Georgia's defense was in 2021, and they were exceptional. The 2022 offense is one of the best in Georgia history, and it really felt like Todd Monken had elevated Georgia to a different um, stratosphere in college football uh, on the offensive side of the ball. So um, I I mean, it does make sense to me that he would go from Georgia to the Ravens. I never thought he was going to Tampa. I mean, that just didn't sound right, didn't feel right, didn't look right. Baltimore is a successful organization. You can't really say that about Tampa in the grand scheme of things, and the fact that Tom Brady's leaving. Real quick, make sure y'all are signing up for the newsletter. That link is right down below. You can see a lot of other stuff down there too. And make sure you're signing up for the newsletter. You don't want to miss out on a lot of the stuff that is written over on the site. But uh, he said, I can't be two places at once. And said, if I wanted to do it, I want to be somewhere that was parallel to Georgia. And again, I think the Ravens have really been a successful NFL program. But I want to hone in on I get way too much credit for our success, talking about the success that Georgia had at the time. Look, one of the reasons why he had success was his development of Stetson Bennett, no question about it. And Stetson, look, Stetson was a really good player at Georgia. He was, and we'll see what happens with his tenure in the NFL, whatever that may be. I mean, it would not be outrageous at all for him to get selected late in the draft. I think he will be. But um, you know, Todd's understanding of Stetson and the capabilities that he had was one of the reasons why Georgia wound up winning the national championship. There was stuff that Stetson could do that other guys couldn't with his legs. That's why if I'm Lamar Jackson, I take a very, very serious look at what Todd Monken can bring to the table. The dynamics of that I couldn't say, but one thing we focus on, or one thing I focused on in the book very specifically during the Ohio State game. Okay, I'm not great at this, but when he talked to Jalen Carter after the game, I was right there, and he said, "These feelings will be forever. You will never forget this." I have it on video, and him and Kenny McIntosh talking. Todd Monken says. Todd Monken put pace behind the photographer's pen as Kirby Smart was lecturing Stetson Bennett on the podium moments before he accepted the silver football that was the Peach Bowl trophy. For much of the night, it didn't look like the Dogs were going to hoist any trophy, but Monken's play calling and Bennett's playmaking, and Kirby's sixth sense timeout took care of all of that. Georgia would survive Ohio State. And it talks about in the book about what it was like with Todd Monken after that game. and that was one of the most significant moments in Georgia history, period. And they don't have confetti moments if Todd Monken doesn't call a heck of a game there at the end. If you want, the confetti is included with double dogs right now. If you pick it up today, I don't know how long it's going to last. We've had a lot of orders ever since the confetti has come in back into play. So make your move, y'all. The people that are not on YouTube are beating you to the punch because they're eating these books up right now. The books will be in everybody's mailbox sooner than later, to be honest with you. But do y'all think that Todd got too much credit? I mean, again, he says I got way too much credit for our success. Well, I mean, I can try to explain this in a way that I think a lot of people would understand. Todd Monken really never failed Georgia in any way. He was not. He wasn't around long enough to become a villain. And the time at which he was at Georgia, the offense was never really a quote problem. Now, that said, if Mark Richt teams were going 16-6 against Kentucky and were goofing around, for lack of a better term, with Georgia Tech late in the season, people would be in a full blown panic. I mean, Georgia folks can panic like nobody's business. They can party like nobody's business, but they can panic like nobody's business. But Todd, while he was at Georgia, did an excellent job of, clearly scoring points was insane at the end of the year. Um, and that's what you got with him. I mean, they were the worst game they played offensively was against Clemson in 2021. I mean, they just didn't play well. And Clemson was good, but they weren't that good. And they just didn't. I mean, Georgia should have scored 20 points in that game. They scored 10. So it was just, I think at the end of the day, revisionist history, Todd and Kirby may have been wrong to wait as long as they did to put Stetson in. And I've said that privately to people, like ask that question kind of, and they just start laughing, like, maybe, and maybe, and I think Kirby has said that, if I'm not mistaken, on the record, at he did say that this year, say something like, maybe we took too long. But, Monken explained, he went through and explained um, what happened when we talked to him before the Ohio State game. He explained what happened with, Stetson had been a really pretty good quarterback for them. He didn't play against Kentucky so hot. And he didn't play great against Alabama, but, he was playing well against Florida before he got hurt. They were up 14-0. And when he got hurt, the game changed. Completely, the game changed. I mean, that's not revisionist history. That's what happened. I mean, the game changed. And, they were out there with Dwan Mathis at quarterback. And, 2 weeks later, I can't remember if Stetson was still hurt. He was still hurt, but I don't know how much it prevented him from playing in that game and preparing for Mississippi State. And, J.C. Daniels played well against State. He played better against South Carolina and Missouri. And then, of course, he kind of fought his way through the Cincinnati game. But those last four games cemented JT into being the starting quarterback at Georgia. And the momentum that they got from, him throwing for almost 400 yards against Mizzou, I do wonder what could have been if Stetson really doesn't get hurt against Florida. But that's a discussion for another time. I think Todd Monken, there's a lot of humility there, but at the same time, he deserves plenty of credit. And with Georgia closing, and this is going off memory, the season going 50 points against LSU, 42 against Ohio State, and then 60 whatever against TCU. I mean, come on, that's a lot. 65 against TCU, I guess it was. That's a lot of points, and that's not just like one of those points, one touchdown of those was a special teams play from Christopher Smith. Everything else, I think, was straight up just Georgia's offense. And that's a lot of points to score at the end of a season. So I think Todd got a lot of credit. I think he deserves a lot of credit. Whether he gets, quote, way too much credit, I mean, that's for somebody else to say, perhaps.